Okay, so back, and we're gonna continue working with that BigN program where we animated a large N and we had it change colors using if statements. But I want to use methods and parameters to reduce the redundancy of the code that we got. I just had a little scare that that recording didn't save, so it did save, which is good. I'll show you. This is my favorite time to record because look how cool the lighting is behind me. I don't know. I just think it's neat lighting. So anyways, make all my videos at this time. So we're going to look at how to reduce redundancy in our BigN code. So when we left, we had these three methods: draw up, draw diagonal, and draw up to. And essentially, the code in each one is the same. I mean, we change the x values and we change the slope on y, and that's it. So I'm gonna let's just close it. Well, I'm trying to think the easiest way to do this. Let's grab everything after the class name and copy it down to even the last brace. And then we'll make a new Java class, BigN2. And I don't need anything in it, so I'm just going to finish because I'm going to copy all this in here. So I'm going to go to that thing and paste it in there. And so I got rid of that error by getting rid of that last thing. And then also maybe I'll grab my comments. It put my import statements in automatically. Let's see, methods and control structures. So I'm just going to grab this same comment structure and let's put it above our import statements. And then maybe go down and just say, BigN2 changes parameters to reduce redundancy. And this can happen after you've done the coding. I mean, you do notice on some sense that sometimes if you can see the structure initially, then creating it as you go is easier. And there is something, it can be hard to sort of code your way out of bad logic, but we can also recognize the redundancy and say, okay, how can we fix this? So basically, look at what's changing in the methods. So from draw up to draw diagonal, what changed is the slope of the y and the x value. And I guess the y value changed, but not really. I'm trying to think about that for a second. Whether we want to send, so those original y values are changing to the y0. So this was 450, and this one was 0. So the y0s are changing. The slopes of the y's are changing, and the x values are potentially changing. So if we figure out how to deal with that, so the slope we can send in here. We're first sending let's send in I guess it doesn't need the x slope because it's always the same as the y slope. Pause for a second. Okay, so whenever I'm stuck, I want to come back to paper. So we know that y is equal to sort of m, let's call it, I want to have an my, let's call it dy. So the change in y, or the slope in the y direction, times I plus y0. And x, we'll call it dx, just because the i's are changing by 1. So the slope and the change in x would be the same. And instead of changing, I'll use a d. So dx times I plus x0. So, you know, I'm not sure we need all 4 of these things, but these are the 4 things that could be changing. So when let's not call it draw up or draw diagonal. Let's call it draw bar, maybe. Draw bar, because it kind of looks like a thick bar. When we call the draw bar, we'll need the panel and the graphics object. And then I don't see why it hurts to sort of pass in dx and x0 and dy and y0 as parameters. So that's 6 parameters total. In this problem, I think we need them all. So even though we didn't change them all, we did in a sense, because that x in one of the values has a different slope. It means that even though in one's case it was equaling y, I want it to work for all the cases. So I want to think of it as its own slope. Okay, so we're going to go back to Eclipse, and we're going to have a new function called draw bar. And draw bar is going to get the panel and the graphics object and dy and a y0 and a dx and an x0. So this creates a little more complexity on the front end here, because we don't have these variables yet. So I need to declare them. Integer dy, initially it's -10. Integer y0 is 0. No, is 450. Integer dx. X doesn't change initially, so that's 0. And integer x0, the initial x value is also 0. So that might feel like more work, and it might actually be more work, but I'm not 100% sure. So let's see what happens. Then we need to define this draw bar. So I'm going to put it above draw up, and I'm going to steal draw up. I'm not going to steal it. I'm going to copy it. Oops. Copy it and paste right above it. And I'm going to change this to calling it draw bar. And then we need 4 integers after this. So integer dy, integer y0, integer dx, so maybe before the first integer, let's hit an enter to kick it down a little bit, and then integer x0. And then my integer y is going to equal, so this -10, looks like that's trying to shut. My computer is having issues. Something with Eclipse. So let me pause the recording. Okay. It came back, so I don't know what that was about. So the the y is now going to be dy times I plus y0. And we're also going to set up an integer x here. And it's going to equal dx times I plus x0. Space it out so you can see it. And then, so that's setting our color. I feel like we should capture that in a method, and I'll do that in a minute. But then when we do this oval, so this is going to be X and Y. Okay, so now I'll take out the call to draw up, because draw bar should do it. And it draws up. This is now draw diagonal, and that's draw up too. So even though this felt like more work, what happens now is when we go to the draw diagonal, the delta y, or the dy, is positive 10. The dx is the same, positive 10. The x0 and y0 are both 0. So actually, when I come back down, maybe I don't need these to be variables if I don't want them to be variables down here, because I could just put these numbers in here. dy negative 10, y0 450, and this is going to make our code easier. dx 0 and x0 is 0. And then when I call it again, just copy that line of code. The dy is now positive 10. The y0 is 0. The dx is also positive 10, and the x0 is 0. Now I don't need any of these variables. And I don't need to draw the diagonal anymore, because draw bar is going to do it for me. Look how nice that is. And then obviously, since we've drawn it up once, we can do it again. So I'll grab this same line of code here, and then we just have to think about, okay, now, yep, dy is negative 10, dx is, or the y naught is 450. The y naught is 450. The dx is 0, and the x0 is also 450. And then I can comment out draw to panel and run it again. And so initially, while it felt like we were having to do a little more work in main, boom. Once we established that those variables are passing, we don't actually need those variables in main. We just need to figure out what the parameters are that we're passing. So now I can just delete all that stuff out, and I no longer need these functions down below, these repetitive draw up, draw diagonal, and draw up to. It's very redundant, so they can all just disappear. And when I delete that, oftentimes when you copy or paste or delete, you might find that you're losing braces. So I just need to line those up correctly. I'm just gonna come back in and maybe I still leave that space in to show us what's going on there, or maybe I tighten it up. I don't know. There's my color happening. I'm just tightening all this up a little bit. Okay. So I want to think about this color information here. The color is always depending on y here. So I want to have another method called getColor. And it's not going to be void. It's going to return an object of type color. And it's going to get an integer value of y in. So I'm going to have an error here because I'm not returning anything. So let's set up, we could initially just return color.green. That'll at least show that the logic is working. So now I want to copy all of this code. Not copy, I want to cut it out of there. Copy, let's copy it first. copy it out of there, set it in here. But instead of, let's see, have this guy in, I don't know what happened. Something happened to my copy paste. I'm gonna undo that. We don't have a G, so that didn't like that. So I won't copy and paste it. It'd be easier just to retype it. So what I want to do is I want to say if y is less than 300, well, we want to set the color to yellow. So we need a color in here. So I'm going to start off with a color. Color C equals green, equals color.green. And then we don't want to return color.green here. We just want to return C. So if y is less than 300, C equals color.yellow. If y is less than 150, I mean, I don't know this code is necessary. C equals, because we're no longer repeating it, color.red. But, you know, it's kind of nice to sort of see another object, a color object here in action. So, so now what I'm going to do is take out all this color stuff. And I could have a new color in here if I wanted. Or I could just do g.setColor, and then I can just call that method here. Get color, I think, right there. I gotta do, doesn't like that. Color, g.setColor, why doesn't it like that? Oh, yeah, because getColor has an integer parameter of y. So I confused myself a little bit by trying to do that in the same, you know, set color, get color. Let me show you that it works, and then I'm going to clean it up a little bit just to, because I feel like that's a little, it's working. That's fine. I feel like it's a little confusing. So to fix that confusion, we could have a color here called C. And then I could say here, C equals get color, sending it Y. And then we could put C in here like that. So instead of doing it in, you know, one line of code, I don't know. This just feels a little bit better in terms of being able to see it. Maybe I want to have more than one get color function, or maybe I want, I don't know, maybe I want to use C somewhere else. So I just feel like that is a little bit slightly better structure. But both will work. And I created longer code, but it may be a little more clear. Okay, so that's success. And here's the code. And notice what happens. You know, main is now really clean. We're drawing 3 bars. We're sending the parameters in. I mean, this is, you know, maybe you know, so we don't really have to comment what these are here because it says it up here, dy, y0, dx, and x0. Yeah, you could come up here and say, you know, for the graphics object, for the oval, y is going to equal dy times I plus y naught And maybe it makes sense to put X first. I'm just doing Y first because the Y was changing first. I mean, as I say this, I'm looking at the code, and we actually have this code right here. So I don't really need this comment. Let's see if I can make my code bigger so you can see it. Maybe I tighten this up a little bit, tighten that up a little bit. I think we almost got the whole thing on here. And that's a much cleaner, more concise way to do the graphics. And you might see this happening in your animation where, you know, if it feels like your method is repeating itself over and over and over, chances are if you fiddle with the parameters a little bit and do some work there, and there's nothing wrong with doing this exactly the way I did it, where I defined 4 values initially, dx, x0, dy, and y0, because that's really what it needs, even though eventually I got rid of those values in main. At first I defined them all so that I could figure out what was going on. And then once I figured out what's going on, I can replace them with the numbers that we're sending. You can see. So hopefully that will help. Let's see if I can make it a little bigger. I guess not. But you know what that get color function is, or you can pause it. Here's my 2 methods. Pause that if you need it. There's my main. Good work.